All right, بداية
I just feel lost. I don't even know what to do.
Please keep them in her and their prayers. It's a lot for all of us. I know everyone had their relationship with Bree, whether it's, for a second, for years, for weeks. I know I only knew her for 3 months, and it hurts me dearly.
On the morning of April 6, 2023, a superstar's daughter fell to the ground as she bled out in front of her toddler. This was 23-year-old Brianna McCoy, who lay dead from gunshot wounds. Nearby, her 18-month-old son Xander was found alive, still in his playpen, left alone in the aftermath of an unspeakable act of violence. The police arrived at the Coachlight Square complex, where they uncovered the devastating scene and discovered an important clue. Brianna had been killed by her boyfriend because she dared to tell him the truth he didn't want to face. After shooting Brianna in the apartment they shared, the suspect fled and ignited a national manhunt that revealed that this was far more than a crime of impulse. It was a warning sign everyone had missed. This is the life and death of Brianna McCoy. Her tragic story unfolds in Bridgeport, Connecticut, USA. It is a diverse and evolving city with a strong sense of community, a rich immigrant culture, and scenic parks along the Long Island Sound. In 2023, despite new developments, the city still struggled with high violent crime rates, including aggravated assaults and robberies. Brianna Destiny McCoy was born on September 22, 1999. She was the daughter of Camille Prince and internationally known Jamaican dancehall icon Ricky Trooper, whose real name is Garfield McCoy. While her father's name carried weight in the reggae world, Brianna was intent on carving her own identity, one rooted in motherhood, independence, and quiet strength. She stayed close to her family and built her own small circle of friends. Known affectionately by some as Bree Balenciaga, she was described by her loved ones as sweet, gentle, and full of light. Brianna was close to her cousins, who admired her reserved nature despite her father's status. But those were not her only virtues. Brianna wasn't flashy or loud, but genuine, kind, and loving. She was the type of person whose laugh lingered in your memory and whose presence lit up any room she entered. Though young, Brianna was building a life for herself and was already making a name for herself. She had recently started working at In the City, a local tapas bar and lounge known for its energetic nightlife and stylish crowd. She worked as a bottle server, but she carried herself with grace. But even as she poured into others, she was missing out on a certain part of life. Soon she met a man who took her life down a totally different path. 41-year-old Derek Francis, also known as Ainsley Forbes, was twice Brianna's age. He was trouble from the onset, but he was trouble she was willing to deal with. The couple was wrapped up in each other and lost in the chemistry. Soon, their relationship created a new role for Brianna that she simply adored. She soon started to balance the pressures of motherhood. Her son Xander was the center of her world. Brianna was focused on her son, providing for him, protecting his future, and doing everything in her power to improve their lives. For a while, it was easy to ignore the cracks that had started to form in their relationship, but she could not forget Derek's past. Derek had a criminal history and was a convicted felon. Though originally from Jamaica, he had been living in the U.S. and was already known to Bridgeport police. Police had already responded to their home on multiple occasions. Their once affectionate relationship soon started to turn into something far more volatile. On several occasions, the couple could be overheard in muted fights and arguments. It was clear to anyone within a mile radius that there was abuse going on within their home. But Brianna still hoped that the man she had fallen in love with, who had given her a beautiful child, would return. But the more she waited, the worse it got. On February 23, 2023, there had been a domestic disturbance call to the police. That call was one of several, confirming what those close to her already knew. The relationship had become dangerous, and Brianna was doing something about it. Brianna had reportedly ended it and was trying to reclaim her space and peace. Her family started to notice that the couple's bond had long been strained, marked by volatility and control. But ending the relationship didn't mean escaping the threat, and Brianna was going the extra mile to avoid this. While cleaning out her daughter's apartment, her mother, Camille, found something she could barely bring herself to read: a handwritten to-do list. Among the errands and reminders, Brianna had written a note to apply for a gun permit. Obviously, Brianna feared for her life and was trying to protect herself. Sadly, she would never get the chance to finish that list. On the morning of April 6th, a neighbor inside the Coachlight Square condo complex reported hearing an argument coming from Brianna's unit. It wasn't the first time. This neighbor had overheard multiple fights between Brianna and Derek before. But this time, something was different. She heard Brianna shouting, begging for it to stop. Her voice rose in panic. Then came the sound that would silence everything. A single, deafening gunshot rang out, followed by a chilling stillness. Moments later, the neighbor saw Derek exiting the apartment. She stepped forward and told him what many had likely wanted to say for months. She told him he needed to stop putting his hands on Brianna. In response, he simply said he knew and apologized. Then he calmly walked away. Concerned, the neighbor went in to check on Brianna, but what she found inside would be burned into her memory forever. Brianna lay, motionless, close to her son's playpen, with blood pooling beneath her. Her son Xander remained in his playpen, wide-eyed and silent. With a loud scream, this neighbor raised the alarm and called the police. By the time police arrived, the damage had already been done. Bridgeport officers arrived shortly before 11:30 a.m. They found Brianna in her bedroom, shot 4 times in the head and upper body with a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. Xander was physically unharmed, but emotionally traumatized, left in the apartment with his mother's body for an unknown length of time. What that child saw and heard that morning will remain with him for life.
He wasn't even expected to live, and she took excellent care of him to the point where he's now. And he was her pride and joy.
Please help the police with any given information.
Telling myself she's probably away and will be returning soon.
Brianna McCoy was dead in a horrific way, and there was work to do. The apartment was sealed off. Detectives swept the scene, photographing bullet casings, collecting evidence, and noting the location of Brianna's body. But while investigators gathered physical evidence, their most urgent clue had already slipped away. Derek Francis had vanished. Bridgeport police wasted no time naming him the primary suspect. He was the last known person to see Brianna alive and had a documented history of domestic incidents involving her. An arrest warrant was issued within hours. But Francis was already moving, and every hour made him harder to catch. This led the police to notify enforcement across multiple states. Soon, the U.S. Marshals Violent Fugitive Task Force joined the case. Francis was officially considered a fugitive. Officers believed he was armed, unpredictable, and capable of more harm. The urgency intensified, and the manhunt was not letting up. For days, police tracked leads across the region. Then, on April 11th, 5 days after Brianna's death, officers in Cuyahoga County, Ohio, pulled over a vehicle tied to one of Francis's associates. He was inside, but instead of surrendering, he ran. He made it only a short distance before he was on the ground and in cuffs. Francis was booked into the Cuyahoga County Jail and held as a fugitive from justice. Initially, he refused to waive extradition, delaying his return to Connecticut. But after several days, he made a different choice. On April 17th, he was escorted back under armed transport. Connecticut would now begin building the case to make sure he never walked free again. At his first court appearance, prosecutors laid out a preliminary overview of the evidence. The courtroom was tense, with Brianna's family present and watching closely. Emotions ran high, but the facts were even heavier, because everything pointed to a premeditated act, and the proof was piling up. Authorities had recovered a 9mm semi-automatic handgun under the passenger seat of the vehicle Francis had fled in. Ballistics testing confirmed it matched the cartridge casings recovered from Brianna's apartment. That weapon was crucial evidence, but this was not all the prosecution had. In addition to the physical evidence, prosecutors presented eyewitness accounts. A neighbor had heard the fatal argument and seen Francis fleeing the apartment. Others had heard previous fights between the couple and confirmed repeated signs of distress. Each testimony added another layer to the picture investigators were building.
23? 23 is like you're not even started with life. That's the saddest thing you can imagine.
It's just heartbreaking that a young life has been lost.
All the people want to show me love and, send condolences to me and the family through that trying time. And that's why the people don't say, yo, bonafide, respect all I want and thanks to the love, but it hard for answer so much phone calls and messages. It's like at the first.
Francis opted to be tried by a panel of 3 judges instead of a jury. His attorney informed the court that the defense would argue he acted under extreme emotional disturbance. This approach aimed to reduce the murder charge to manslaughter, a bold move that quickly proves hard to establish. To make that defense, his attorney would need to convince the court this was a breakdown, not a calculated decision. The court was prepared to entertain this, so they put him to the test. A psychiatrist was appointed to evaluate Francis. The defense claimed the relationship had emotionally destabilized him and that his actions were not intentional but the result of a mental crisis. The doctor was expected to return a full psychological report. Meanwhile, the state prepared to dismantle that argument with facts. Francis had already changed his story more than once. At first, he claimed Brianna had the gun. Later, he said he discovered it while looking for money she had supposedly hidden. Prosecutors pointed to the inconsistencies as evidence of manipulation. They believed the story was being rewritten to fit a defense, not the truth. In the weeks leading up to the trial, additional history had surfaced. Brianna had contacted police on multiple occasions, including a documented domestic incident in February, just weeks before her death. She had ended the relationship. She was making plans for independence, and prosecutors believed Francis killed her to stop her from leaving. The court heard from law enforcement, forensic experts, and Brianna's family. They reviewed the child's trauma, the neighbor's eyewitness account, and prior records that suggested a long pattern of volatility and control. Things started to look bad for Francis. Each new fact chipped away at the emotional disturbance defense. The trial proceeded in April 2025. Over several sessions, the judges reviewed all submitted materials. Xander's condition, including his ongoing speech therapy, was entered into the record as part of the crime's lasting impact. The judges now had everything they needed to decide whether this was murder or a moment of mental collapse. The long-awaited time had come, and everyone was eager for the verdict. On April 25, 2025, the panel delivered its verdict: guilty of murder. The claim of emotional disturbance was rejected. The court concluded that Francis had full awareness of his actions and had shown intent both during and after the shooting. He hadn't lost control, he had simply refused to let go. Next, the heavy sentence was delivered. On June 5th, the final sentence was announced: 55 years in prison. The penalty reflected the gravity of the crime, the vulnerability of the child witness, and the history of prior abuse. But for Brianna's family, no sentence could restore what they had lost. Camille Prince, Brianna's mother, had attended nearly every hearing, every update, and every painful recounting of her daughter's final hours. In the end, she got the justice she had waited for. Francis was going to prison, possibly for the rest of his life. But no outcome could undo what had already been done. Brianna's father, Ricky Trooper, had mourned his daughter publicly and privately. On the anniversary of her death, he expressed the weight of his grief, stating that the pain had only worsened over time. His daughter had been taken suddenly, violently, and in front of her own child. This had inflicted the boy with a heartbreaking disability. Xander, the child left behind, was not speaking. Since the shooting, he had remained silent. Therapists diagnosed his trauma as a stress response to witnessing the violence. He was only 18 months old at the time, but the emotional impact was already visible. Every therapy session was a reminder of what he had seen and what he had lost. Camille later confirmed that Xander was receiving consistent care, but recovery was slow. His routine had changed entirely. New home, new guardianship, new structure. As he aged, a time would come when questions would have to be answered, and the people who loved him most would eventually have to explain how his mother died. In the days following the murder, the city of Bridgeport responded. A vigil was held outside in the city, the lounge where Brianna had worked before her death. Friends, family, and even strangers gathered with candles, posters, and messages of remembrance.
Family, we just want to thank everyone for being here. We want to send our Bree's son, her family, especially her mom who's present. Please keep them in her and their prayers. It's a lot for all of us. I know everyone had their relationship with Bree, whether it's, for a second, for years, for weeks. I know I only knew her for 3 months, and it hurts me here. We love you, Bree!
More than 40 people stood outside the lounge, releasing pink and blue balloons into the night sky. Photos of Brianna were displayed on a screen. Attendees described her kindness, her calm demeanor, and her deep love for her son. Friends described how Brianna had carried herself with quiet strength. She was not someone who overshared, nor someone who looked for attention. Her focus was on Xander. Her life was work and motherhood. And even when things got difficult, she continued to move forward. But what she kept private had turned out to be far more serious than most realized. A GoFundMe was created to support Xander, helping to cover therapy costs and basic needs. The community contributed, with friends and strangers sharing the link, posting tributes, and committing to helping the family in any way they could. But money could only solve logistical problems, not the emotional wreckage left behind.
This is a donation, all proceeds tonight. Whether you are donating at the door, if you are purchasing at the bar, everything will be going to the family.
Please come out and support this family. They lost a loved one. They need the community support.
An advocate, not just for her grandson, but for domestic violence awareness. She urged others to recognize red flags, to speak up when something feels wrong, and to support women trying to leave dangerous situations. Because for Brianna, the signs had been there, but the ending still came too soon. The funeral was private but well attended. Family and friends gathered to say goodbye, not just to mourn, but to honor Brianna's life. She was laid to rest surrounded by the people who knew her best. There were no cameras, no reporters, just the people who had loved her most. It was the final chapter of a life cut short, but not forgotten. Even now, nearly 2 years after her death, people still ask how it could have happened. How could someone harm the mother of their own child? How could a person walk out of an apartment and leave an infant behind with the person they just killed? These are the questions that still have no answers. Brianna wasn't weak. She wasn't passive. She was trying to protect herself and her child. She was working, parenting, and quietly building a plan for independence. She did everything many victims of abuse try to do. But in the end, her efforts were cut off before she could escape. If you know someone who is dealing with emotional or physical abuse, do not wait. Encourage them to talk to someone. Help them find resources. If you hear shouting, or see signs of bruising, or notice isolation, say something. Because silence gives power to the abuser, and silence is what killed Brianna. Let Brianna McCoy's story be a reason to ask more questions, listen more closely, and act more urgently. Let her memory serve as more than a headline. Let it be a turning point for someone else. Let me know what you think in the comments section below. Comment section below. Comment section below.